everyone, and welcome back to The ReQuest. 'Tis I, Captain Logan, and joining me as always is the magnanimous TheDayGhost.
I'm here at the Valley of the Dolls, Captain.
No, you're beyond it. Actually, I don't know that either of us will ever get beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
No, and I don't want to. I want to live in this movie. I want to climb into the case of the Blu-ray and live there.
Is this your happy place now?
Yes, exactly.
I don't know what that says about you.
It says a lot. I'm like Beetlejuice, not Scream, which I often confuse those two films. But with Beetlejuice, where he says that he keeps watching The Exorcist over and over again, and it keeps getting funnier. That's me here.
Okay, but then the question is, and I don't want to get too deep into this yet before we've set it up, but does that mean that you enjoyed this ironically, or did you enjoy this movie in a legitimate way, or is it possible to even tell the difference between those two with a thing that is as confused in its identity as I think this movie is?
Well, I already live in a life where I can't tell how ironic my life is in general, so...
Oh, so you're just right at home here.
No, this movie, like I said, I just want to live there. It is my life.
This felt like right up your alley 10 minutes in. I was just like, Austin's going to love this movie. I don't care what happens with the rest of this. Cult classics just seem to appeal to you, a lot of them, right? Or the kind of so bad it's good sort of movie. And I don't know if that falls... if this falls into that category. This strikes me as almost more of like a, I don't know, unreviewable or like review-proof sort of movie, and I'm always like really careful to say that because I don't like the idea that anything is impenetrable in a critical sort of way, but like this is one of those movies that is, or I say one of, there's nothing else like, when you get the text at the beginning and it says, this is not a sequel to Valley of the Dolls, there's nothing like this. I get to the end, I'm like, you're right. That was absolutely correct. There's nothing else like this movie.
Well, if anybody's going to make a review-proof movie, it would be like one of the most famous critics of all time, right?
It really feels like Roger Ebert is trolling everybody with this movie. Mm-hmm. And yet it's hard. Exactly. It was difficult while watching it to tell how sincere the script wanted to be. And looking into it a little bit, I don't know, I spent 10 or 15 minutes looking up things about this movie. And
more than I did, so.
It seems like Ebert intended this to be straight up a spoof, straight up parody. But intentionally, the director didn't tell any of the actors that that's what it was. So they played it completely straight while they were all looking at the script going, this is preposterous and ridiculous, and this dialogue is like really hammy and cliche, and all these characters are really wooden and one-dimensional. But they were apparently all afraid to ask the director which it was supposed to be, like if they were making a parody or if they were making a serious piece, because they didn't want to hurt his feelings.
That's amazing. Now I need to rewatch it just with that knowledge.
and then it gives it what Ebert called a very curious tone.
No, that's a perfect description, because I was watching this and I was like, I'm pretty sure this film gave me a contact acid high, and I've never had that with a movie before, but that's how I feel right now.
It really feels like that's, if it's after anything, it feels like that's what it's after, right? That you could sort of kind of get a sense of what it's like to be on some of the drugs that the characters in the movie are on without actually having to take them yourself. And then you get to the end, and it has the preachiest, weirdest voiceover that it explains like 15 different messages in a movie that Ebert said years after he made it is messageless. You've got this guy explaining all the different messages, I guess saying, here's why you shouldn't take any of the drugs that the movie makes you feel like you're on.
Yeah, no, it's kind of like there's a Simpsons Christmas episode, where at the very end they like have like a spoof voiceover, and it just like nails out like all the big famous like Christmas endings where it's like, meanwhile, like Mr. Burns was visited by three ghosts last night, and also during the night Mo had a dream where like he was never born and he got to see what life looked like that, and they just kind of go through all of that. That's the voiceover at the end of this. It's
That's
awesome.
that's hilarious. That's exactly what it's like, and yet I couldn't have begun to expect it. The a narrator pops in like there's been a narrator. The whole movie, or any point in the movie, there hasn't. But we're getting way ahead of ourselves. This was requested, I forgot to mention at the beginning, by Stone Gassman, and thanks very much to him. This is a thing I was always curious about, but knowing what little I knew about it, I honestly never intended to sit down and watch this, because it sounded like a thing that was very much not up my alley, and a thing that I figured I just wouldn't even understand what I was looking at. This is for lack of a better box to put it in, because I don't think you can put this in a box. I think it's an absolute like sprawling sea creature that is uncontainable. But it's a sexploitation film, and a thing that I had always heard bordered on like softcore porn, and I was like, well, that doesn't sound fun to watch. I figured you wouldn't even be able to see the Ebert in it at all. Like, you would watch this and it almost wouldn't even have a right. It's a lot more dialogue driven, if I can even say that, than I expected it to be. There's a lot more people talking and like an actual writer behind it than I thought there would be. I thought this would be totally incoherent from beginning to end and wouldn't even be attempting to tell any kind of story, and would just be like party scene after party scene with nothing tying it all together. And what's weird is I got halfway into this movie and went, I know what's happening. I'm following this. This is a coherent piece, even though, yes, it's weird and it's trippy and there's tons of nudity, and it simultaneously seems to be glorifying sex and drugs and stuff, while also being a cautionary tale telling you to stay away from from those things. And like, it seems like it's kind of anti the seven deadly sins. Like it's hey kids, don't. It's an NC-17 movie saying, "Hey kids,
Yeah, they play this at school, at like Sunday school. They're like, make sure, kids.
yeah, you put it on it in junior high as school play, and it's like if you get into show, it's all about the dangers and the horrors of show business, and it seemed like, in a certain way, it was going through the formula of a really typical rags to riches Hollywood, or like a rock star kind of story. And then by the third act, and by the time you got, I don't know if I can say third act for this. By the time you got to the end of this movie, I was like, oh, it's wound right back around to the kind of movie I thought this was gonna be. It is really gratuitous. It does border in places on pornography, particularly toward the end. And I don't know what the hell is happening by the end of this movie. It is completely an incomprehensible nonsense fest by the end, and it feels like it transformed into a completely different movie. But halfway through this, I was like, I've seen this movie before, just without quite as many topless women. And then I got to the end, I was like, I've never seen anything like this movie.
That's funny because so about halfway through this movie, for me, I'm watching a scene and I'm like, huh, this scene is like exactly a scene from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino's last movie. And then when I got to the end, I was like, no, that's definitely intentional. He clearly loves this movie, and this was part of the influence for that.
Yeah, I misjudged how influential this movie is, and that anybody has actually seen it, and that people are still watching it even. This was directed by, I forget his name, but the guy who made Faster Pussycat Kill Kill, Russ Meyer. And a lot of people, and I've never seen his movies, but that is a cult classic and kind of beloved by a group. He does not, or did not consider that to be his greatest achievement. It was this. He considers Beyond the Valley of the Dolls to be like the quintessential centerpiece of his career.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Oh, he's still alive. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, even so I had to look it up too. I looked up the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood
I
connections
shouldn't have
too.
assumed he was
And
deceased, but I guess I just didn't realize he was still around.
it is a 1970 film. That's not like too out of the question. And apparently, though, in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Tarantino like tried to fight to have a song from this movie in the soundtrack of that.
Interesting.
Hmm.
And couldn't make it happen.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
that's sad. This is, by the way, I don't know if you'll agree with this. Pretty kick-ass soundtrack. Like I
Hmm.
liked a lot of the music in this.
No, the music's awesome. Just like everything in this movie's awesome. And you mentioned the dialogue earlier too. And for like the first little bit, I was laughing because there is no pause between any of the dialogue through a lot of this movie,
Yep.
where people say something and there's no break. It immediately is the next line, even if you cut to a different scene. And it's amazing. I've never seen a movie like that, but it just added to that acid trip of it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the closest thing I can think of to compare it to is like West Wing dialogue. You know, where, like people are just trying to cram, or like Social Network. You know, that guy, like just trying to. What is that? The name of that writer? I know him. I love that writer. It's just not
Oh,
coming to me right off.
Aaron Sorkin.
Aaron Sorkin. Thank you very much. It's it's like that, but like less self-aware or something. You know,
Yeah,
where like
less
you're
like
just cramming
political
as
or
much words in a thing as possible. You're like, there's no way a person is coming up with this in the moment. This is so rehearsed.
It's not trying to sound smart.
But somehow with Sorkin, it feels like natural enough where like it's not exactly realistic, but you feel like for the world the worlds he's creating, you can it somehow feels realistic then, and then you finish watching the movie and you're like, wait, people can't possibly get all those words. This doesn't have that, but also like he has like different characters with somewhat different ways of speaking and stuff. And this does not have that. Like everybody is the same.
No, everybody, it's like you're all connected. One love, peace, all that stuff. It fits into the theme of the movie.
That's a good point. We're gonna try our darndest. I don't want to get too far into the weeds with this, and this is a thing that I don't know how to talk about without totally spoiling. So if you really want to watch this and you don't want to know too much about the
And
insanity of the
make
ending,
sure you watch this.
wa-
Everybody needs to see this movie.
watch it
Everyone.
before you see the rest of this video. But we're gonna try to make some sense out of some of the story with this. But before we get into even the setup of the premise and stuff, Austin, I just want to say that because this was my big takeaway from this movie. I wasn't sure, even after reading the script, what to expect from the ultimate final CW Powerpuff Girls pilot, but this was not. It was. This is so much far beyond what I thought that
Without
would
the
be.
dolls.
10 minutes in, I'm casting these three girls as Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup,
If
and
this were the CW Powerpuff Girls, I would watch it on loop.
then you have like it's weird how well that lines up. It's like if Powerpuff Girls was a like horrifying cautionary tale about the dangers of becoming a rock musician, and it's like, you know, morally bereft Powerpuff Girls, which is what the CW pilot seemed like it was going to be. And then you have like Z-Man as Mojo Jojo,
I
and
was
like
gonna
it's
say, is that who?
weird all how it could possibly kind of fit together. And then came the scene that obviously this is all decades and decades retroactive, but then came the scene that completely freaking blew my brain off, my head off my shoulders. Do you know what I'm gonna say? Do you know the scene? Okay.
I'm not entirely sure where you're going.
the
No.
the TV interview scene, and not for the reason that it probably blew everybody else's minds, because you really didn't expect the like self-absorbed, money-grubbing boyfriend guy to try to commit suicide in the middle of that scene, throw himself off a balcony and drop to the... No, it wasn't that. I was already freaking out. You know why? Because the three main female protagonists in this were all wearing Powerpuff Girl colors in that scene, and the colors of their shirts reflected the ones I had cast. Like, the girl I thought was Bubbles was wearing blue, and the girl that was Blossom was wearing was wearing red, and the other girl was wearing green, and I'd cast her as Buttercup, and I just couldn't even believe it.
That's awesome.
They're morally bereft Powerpuff Girls. It's amazing. Like, you've got the leader type girl who is the one who's trying to get the inheritance, who thinks that she's entitled to like $250,000, $500,000, whatever it is. And then you have the and so, you know, she's the take charge one, but like, you know, Blossom, of course, is really altruistic and trying to always make sure everybody's doing the right thing. And she's, like, super emotionally manipulative. She's like if Blossom was Lex Luthor or something. And then you have, I'm not looking at the character names here, I guess she's Casey, right? And then Kelly is your Bubbles. Kelly is, see, I don't like doing this because now I'm just, like, sexualizing the most wholesome character in anything with Bubbles, but Kelly is Bubbles if she's in a backseat of a car going up Bentley. And then
that scene.
And then Pet is Scorsese also loves that scene apparently.
This is why Scorsese is awesome. I am so glad I live in a world where I know that Scorsese thinks this is cinema.
I'm pretty sure, and I apologize if I'm wrong about this, I'm pretty sure it is Scorsese because of course he and Roger Ebert were friends, and Roger Ebert had a lot to do with why Scorsese got on the map and became as prevalent as he did, and because Ebert was talking about his movies when they were a lot more obscure and not a lot of people were looking at them, and they both had, you know, mutual admiration for each other, and Ebert would still, if he didn't like a Scorsese movie, you know, not pull his punches. I mean, there were at least a couple where he was like, this is wretched, and the man has gone off the rails. Like, it happened. But I'm pretty sure it was Scorsese in the Ebert documentary Life Itself, which is a beautiful piece, and everybody should watch it, especially if you like documentaries of any kind. I've seen it 5 or 6 times. It's one of my favorite movies, not just documentaries, but movies. Based on Ebert's autobiography. I'm pretty sure it's Scorsese in that who opens the Valley of the Dolls segment and is like, Beyond the Valley of the Dolls is like, I don't know how he ended up making that, and then he's like, and then he breaks down that scene and talks about how cool the editing with that is.
No, that part's awesome.
There's some neat experimental stuff going on with the editing in this movie.
Yeah, no, that's why I don't know if I can entirely say this is like an ironic, like, it's funny bad, because there is some, like, legitimately really cool stuff in it like that. I like the editing. And this movie looks really good, too.
Yeah.
Like,
there's a lot of really good visual storytelling.
It's melodramatic in its writing, but that's just part of the charm. That's
just
part of the enjoyment.
Or if not storytelling, at least just, like, visual art, right? Because, I mean, even Ebert said this is a movie that's intended to, like, you know, make you feel things in a moment and give you a variety of different experiences before it's meant to really tell a story. And as you commented when you started watching it, because you said it was amusing that this was that Ebert, you know, made a movie that's the kind of thing that he hated. Like, if Ebert reviewed this movie, he would not have understood it and he would have disliked it. I'm positive. I'm mostly positive about that. I think his review actually would have been, I can't follow it. It purports to be a story, but it's not actually about anything, and it's like trying to. It's the kind of movie that's throwing in everything but the kitchen sink and trying to kind of make everybody happy, but I'm giving it extra points because I enjoyed the attractive women, because he gave reviews like that. That happens sometimes with Ebert.
Yeah, because you know Ebert more than I do, because I'm more familiar with like
He's a personal
stuff.
hero of mine. I've followed
Mm,
his career pretty closely. I've read a lot of his stuff.
yeah, exactly. And I know Ebert more for like just like weird things that he said, like
Yeah.
how he hates say like Carpenter's The Thing or Hellraiser, but he watched Anaconda and he was like, "That's a really creative movie." Like I know him more for like that stuff.
He's the
Um,
only person on the planet besides me that liked Hitman,
oh,
the
interesting.
movie based on the video game.
Yeah.
And it's one of my favorite endings to one of his reviews because he said something along the lines of it's I can't remember what exactly how exactly he worded it, but like it's skirting around art. Like it's not art, but like it's almost there.
I'll have to check that out then, because I've been like meaning to, because both Hitman movies are on Disney Plus here.
Oh,
Um,
interesting. I couldn't get 20 minutes into the remake.
oh,
And I bought that when it came out. And I wish I hadn't done that. That's the Zachary Quinto movie.
yeah. Oh, okay. Well, that sucks.
Agent 47. They slapped Hitman on it because they were afraid nobody would watch it if it didn't say Hitman, and nobody watched it anyway. But
Yeah,
I
it didn't
digress.
exactly work out. Um, but yeah, so with this, I also went into this movie thinking it was like a grindhousey, like violent film, and I mean, you kind of
And
get
it
that at
is,
the end.
eventually.
But through most of it, I was like, this is just not at all what I was expecting. Like, this is way cooler than what I thought I was in for. Because I was expecting more something like Last House on the Left, which is just a miserable, just like dark movie. And
What made you
this was
think
just
it would be
fun.
that kind of movie?
I don't know, because I didn't really know anything about this going into it, but I just assumed for whatever reason that's what it was. Because everybody was like, it's a movie that he wouldn't like. So I think I just made connections that I shouldn't have off of that as a statement.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So I was like, I was thinking more of like, even if it's not as far as like a lot of like, more grindhousey stuff, like even if it was around like, say like Friday the 13th, which is another thing that he hated. And then it's also not really that. I
I think
mean,
I think the reason people said that he made a movie that he would have hated is that it's kind of cheating. You know what I mean? In that, like, it's a thing that isn't clear enough that it's just a farce or just parody, and is trying to get away with 101 things by being intentionally review proof. Where it's like, well, you can't say that we didn't do this narratively well because we're not a narrative piece. Yeah, but you are a narrative piece. And, like, that kind of thing drove him crazy with a lot of movies.
mhm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's probably just where my kind of ignorance with Roger Ebert comes in.
It strikes me as the sort of movie that is a lot more about the making of it than it is about the product itself, kind of.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? Where it's like, just
Yeah, I
this
can
is
see
an
that.
experience that this director wanted to have. But then maybe that's not fair, because there is certainly a piece here. Like, it's it's self-indulgent. I think it's absolutely fair to call it that, especially because reading up on his background, apparently he was intentionally spoofing some of his own stuff, and a lot of contemporary reviewers thought that that was really pretentious.
Mm. Yeah, and I think for me, I'm like, this movie is so just like its own weird ball. It's almost like The Room, where the more you know about it, there's like a mystique that gets taken away. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. I had that a little bit reading up on it, like, because the whole way through I was like, is this a parody? And if it is, what's it a parody of? What is happening? Like, there are things in it from the period that I kind of recognized, but I didn't understand what it was doing with them and what it was saying about. Like, I'm like, uh, broadly, clearly, this is a satire. There's no way this isn't a satire. What's it satirizing? Like, beyond just, he's gonna say the Valley of the Dog. I'm discovering words I use a lot when
This is
we,
like there was another
because
video
of
of you
titles.
recently where you kept saying the like the start of the title.
Yeah,
And
about. I'd be like, this movie is
about
about, and then you would go, time. That's happening with this.
just wait till we do Common Rider next week, and you'll be like, this is very common, and then I'll be like, right.
Rioter. Inevitably, I'll find myself using that word. You don't know what it is? Just like these prophetic titles where I get them in my head, and then I can't stop using the title in the review.
Don't worry, I'll throw you off. I'll say Thunderdome next time you say Beyond.
But besides the Valley of the Dolls, besides the man, I don't even know what I was saying. Where I was
now
going
I'm
with
just
this.
thinking we're throwing out some Planet of the Apes titles, like we're beside the Planet of the Apes.
But anyway, this I didn't know this while watching it, and like you said, it kind of takes the mystique away a little bit. But apparently, this is, if not beat for beat, I don't know, like act for act, kind of supposed to just be a parody of its predecessor. So instead of a sequel, it's a spoof of the movie that was made 3 years earlier called Valley of the Dolls. And I'm like, well, I would probably understand this as a spoof a lot more, like a satire, if I had seen that movie. But I didn't. So as I'm looking at it, I'm just like racking my brain constantly, going like, what are we making fun of here exactly? Besides, just in general, movies that are about rock bands that or like kids that get in bands who are in over their heads, and that kind of really typical formula of you get really famous and you don't know what to do with your wealth and your fame, and you get really greedy and you get really in over your head, and then you have like a horrible tragic downfall. Like, it's making fun of that kind of stuff. Like, but I'm like, I kept trying to think of contemporary stuff because I haven't watched a lot of 60s movies in a long time. So I'm like, are we going back to like the Jazz Singer? Like, what exactly are we looking at?
Yeah, it sounds like your experience was a lot like me trying to watch Dark Space. I think it's called Dark Space.
I don't know what that is.
It's John Carpenter's college film that he made with the writer of Alien. And it was this like sci-fi comedy, and it even opens with like a text crawl that's like, yeah, we tried to make a comedy and it didn't work. And there's one segment of that film, because it's basically a bunch of shorts, that the writer then took, and that became Alien, where he was like, nobody laughed at my comedy movie. I'm going to take this part out and make it a scary movie, and I'm going to scare all you people that didn't laugh at my movie.
That's amazing. And then that turns into like a film canon kind of movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know why the disclaimer is there at the beginning of this?
I don't. Why?
So at the beginning of this, there's a disclaimer, again, it's really funny that it's like this written disclaimer when then you get to the end and there's a narrator explaining everything to you for 5 minutes. Like, this is what this movie was about. I assumed it was there just to make sure that anybody that had actually seen Valley of the Dolls wasn't confused when this wasn't the direct sequel that originally it was supposed to be. But apparently, the woman who wrote the novel that Valley of the Dolls was based on sued this movie because she thought that it was like, I don't know if slanderous is the right word, but made her look bad because her piece wasn't a sexploitation thing, and it had the name of her film and movie in the title of it. So if anybody thought that she was involved, then there are assumptions that they're making about her. So anyway, they thought they had to put in this disclaimer to separate the two things, and she was, or at least her estate, I guess, was awarded like $2 million. Like, she won the case, but posthumously. Like, she died before it even went to trial.
Oh, damn. So it's kind of like I think it's Stephen King and Lawnmower Man, I think.
Oh, interesting.
There's one of his films that he sues over because they take that title and they just do their own thing with it, and he was like, no.
It's like Stephen King when he won posthumously.
Well, yeah, Stephen King's been dead for a long time, but,
he's
his
even
corpse
written
just
movies
keeps
since
pumping
then.
out stuff. I'm sure that'll happen when Stephen King dies. He's still got to pump out 6 books a year.
So do me a favor, Austin. We're half an hour into this review. Would you please tell us what the story is about? Give us the basic setup. Like, what happens in this movie?
Okay, so I don't know any of the characters' names are, but one of the Powerpuff Girls shows up and she gets brought into this like musical group, I guess. And they're gonna, do their thing and party and have drugs and all that stuff and have a lot of sex. And then you kind of just live with them for a while as they do their thing. And they're each kind of having their own melodramatic side story, I guess.
Oh yeah, and the band was called the Kelly Affair, but apparently that was really outdated for some reason.
Yeah.
I could not put myself in this time period to be like, oh yeah, that was really old-fashioned at that point, and Carrie Nations was real, like, hip and a cooler sounding name. I did not understand that.
No, that's a more swinging name. And then a lot of people have sex and take drugs and party and sing. There's a lot of singing in this movie too. A lot of just like cuts to music videos where you have people like fading in and out.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of realizing and accepting alternative sexualities in a period where you didn't see as much of that. Although apparently the original Valley of the Dolls also did that, and this is not pushing envelopes, but parroting that, I guess? But I've not seen that movie, so I don't know how far it takes that. But you have gay men having sex and gay women having sex in a 1970 movie.
Mm-hmm. But this time it's just because it's funny.
Yes, and you also have a drag queen who the whole movie you thought was a man, who there's a big reveal at the end that it turns out it was a woman, and I guess distinction, like, not a transvestite, but just things I never talk about on the channel, but a drag queen, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of like a sleepaway camp reveal.
Yeah,
and then you end on craziness, and everybody, it's very Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. You just end on, like, you have a movie that has no violence, and then you just end with like a bunch of violence.
It's fascinating to me that a bunch of people now have experienced something like, and I haven't seen that movie, but have experienced something like this with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, who probably have no idea that kind of thing has been made, and that's why that movie happened.
Yeah, no, it was really fascinating when that connection was like finally made, and it was like, wow, like I never would have guessed, because obviously Tarantino, all of his films are like some sort of love letter to like a specific like point in like film history.
Yeah.
And I knew, because that movie takes place in 1969, this is 1970.
Mm-hmm.
So it's looking at some stuff like that, but I didn't expect it to, take quite a bit from this movie, which was like really fascinating. Somebody requests that movie, because Cap's got to watch it.
Yeah, I do want to watch that at some point. Well, and it's also really interesting that, that's about, I would assume, like, tragedy and evils of Hollywood, and this is the same thing with rock bands. Like, that, it sounds like that whole movie is looking at this harder than anybody realized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, because that entire film is about, like, how kind of crappy Hollywood is to actors, and they just kind of, get cycled out. And not as much sex, though.
I don't think you can get away with that now. With just the sheer amount of that you had in this movie without getting beyond an R.
Thunderdome.
Rating.
Beyond the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, apparently Meyer's response when he was going to get an NC-17 rating was, instead of taking out some of the nudity and violence in order to try to get an R, he was gonna put a bunch more in. Where he was like, all right, we got this rating anyway, and then Fox wouldn't give it. Wasn't that they wouldn't allow him to do it, they just wouldn't give him the time to do the reshoots.
It's a bold strategy. Let's see if it pays off.
Can you imagine this movie with any more of that?
No, but I want to see a director's cut. I want to see the universe where there is a director's cut of this movie.
Yeah, I was talking earlier about how Roger Ebert like really appreciated eroticism in movies, and he would talk about like when that was done well and when it was mean-spirited or when it was exploitative. This is an intentionally exploitative movie that I would argue in places does. Is like legitimately sexy and like where the eroticism is stuff I never talk about on the channel is handled kind of artfully, but I feel so funky about that because it's also a movie that's like that's kind of condemning some of those things, but then I'm like, oh, but it's parody of movies that are condemning those things, so then it wends itself back around to this stuff is awesome and you should love it, I guess.
No, this film exists in a weird place where it just is, and it's awesome. And that's
the last
all you can say.
The last 20 minutes, half an hour of this movie, when it degenerates into, it's weird saying this, but it is kind of what it is, like a parody of the Manson killings. This was like just after that happened.
I was thinking about that in that it's kind of insane this came out when it did.
Yeah.
Like, that wasn't like a huge issue.
It's such a post... Yeah, and like, I don't mean to be crassy in saying that, but I don't know how else to put it, because it's handled in such a comedic way at the end. It's like it's just making fun of the dour times we're... Is that what it is? Where it's like, we can laugh about anything, and that's how we're gonna get through this really dark period?
Maybe, which I think, again,
because it's so post 1969. It's so like the world is falling, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which is an interesting thing to compare to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, because that is so much about like take this like awful moment and kind of take the teeth out of it, and like make it comedic in that sense. Well, as opposed to here, it's more so doing a parody of exactly what happened.
It's really bizarre. The person that Z-Man is based on, because some of these characters are apparently like based specifically on real people who lived. Z-Man is supposed to be Phil Spector, the real life producer. And what's bizarre is apparently 3 decades after this movie, that guy was convicted of murder in a situation that is eerily similar to this one.
Roger Ebert went forward in time and was parodying things that hadn't happened yet.
It's nuts! I don't even know what to say about this. This movie is strange and bizarre and also prophetic.
Yeah, because like a lot of that stuff I could see at the time you watch and you're like, oh, that's really low, and like I can't believe that they did that. Like, you know what I mean? It would be like if you did
like below the belt.
Yeah, like if you had like a parody of 9/11 in like 2002.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. It feels like the 9/11 thing. It feels like just after 1969. This is the only time that you could possibly make a thing like this. It was surreal to me that they took particular outfits from 60s Batman and threw it at the end of this movie for a couple of reasons. And actually, the last 15-20 minutes just starts referencing and ripping off everything, and there weren't a lot of pop culture references before that I noticed, although there might have been stuff that just went over my head. But then you get to the end and it's like, and then here's Sorcerer's Apprentice, and then here's like Catwoman and Robin, and then the auto guy is just a closeted Nazi, and there's all these bizarre references and strange things that are happening.
When they're all talking and it just cut to a Nazi, I was just like, what is happening? I love this.
I was making connections with 60s Batman all the way through this, partly just because some of the things this movie is doing is just the way certain kinds of entertainment was made then. So, I mean, just basic, like, film quality stuff and some of, like, choices of lighting and things. But then, like, and I don't mean to go back to 60s Batman for everything like I do. I was going to try not to even bring it up halfway into the movie because I was like, I don't want to seem like the only thing from the 60s I've ever seen is that. And then the movie just straight up starts referencing 60s Batman, and I'm like, well, I guess we have to go there now. There are Dutch angles all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are scenes, and some of the, like, elaborate set pieces look like villain sets from 60s Batman. Like, they're looking at that show, and in a lot of places it feels like Andy Warhol could have made this movie.
Oh, that's awesome.
Who also was in love with that show and with Batman in general, and made a Batman movie that was not DC and that I think he got sued for. But I digress.
Wasn't quite like the soup can.
Yeah, not really. I get why he thought he should be allowed to get away with that, but that's not how the copyright rules worked even back then. But I thought it was really interesting that we straight up bring in iconography from that show because that felt to a lot of people at the time like a thing that had happened 20 years ago already as it was ending. Like the world in 1966 versus the world in 1969 feel like decades happened between them. It felt like you were in, not that I was around for it, but from accounts that I've watched documentaries with people that experienced it, and just going back and looking at the culture from the time, you can really see the difference between those time periods, where the world felt a lot more innocent and a lot more hopeful, and you understood how something like Star Trek and something like Batman '66 could exist and be greenlit and I mean, Star Trek is kind of another ball of wax because that was supposed to happen 2 years earlier. But you see, like, how what was in the air right then made those things possible in '66, and simultaneously why they both got canceled in 1969.
Oh, okay, interesting. Yeah,
And then it feels like this movie is directly, in its satire, responding to the things happening in the world that make everything feel a lot more doom and gloom, and like the sky is falling, and like we can't have that kind of like fun, innocent spoofing of everything like we were getting with '60s Batman, and the sort of like more wholesome satire that you were getting with that show, but also the like what we had with Star Trek, where we were pretty sure that things were gonna work out, it was all gonna be okay, and like we're in a world where none of that seemed relevant anymore, and this movie doesn't get made in 1968. Like, it's really interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of like I know I keep going to this movie.
It ain't hopeful, is what I'm saying.
In it, but it's kind of the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood makes like a case that like that specific like moment in 1969 is like the end of like that Hollywood era, and like everything after that, is like very different. And it also has a cool 66 Batman thing.
Oh, really? I have to watch that. It sounds like maybe that movie is like intentionally a more sober version of this, where it's like, how do we make Beyond the Valley of the Dolls accessible and watchable? And
yeah, and it's also awesome. You lose the like acid tripness that I love about this movie, but I do love both films. That's also a really great movie.
Because this is certainly having a lot of fun with itself, but at the same time, the more we're talking about it, I think, and like, you know me, Austin, I'm real all about death of the author. Even if Ebert doesn't realize it or didn't realize it, I feel like the piece itself may actually have like an embedded message that even went over the author's head, right? That like it just ends up embodying as the whole piece comes together. maybe there's something to, and this could sound like a really pretentious statement. I don't know, but maybe
Those
there's
are the
some
best kind of statements.
maybe there's something to how like manic and bipolar and all over the place this piece is, being the satire of the things that it is and having come out when it came out, where it's like the movie makes sense because nothing makes sense. I mean, like maybe there's something there.
Hmm. We just got to keep watching this movie, and then maybe eventually we'll find out.
We'll figure out what it means.
And we'll never get beyond it, but we'll figure out what it is.
But I feel like maybe that's what it is, you know? Where, like, Valley of the Dolls, which I've not seen, but was apparently making, a very specific point about what happens when you get too wrapped up in fame and fortune and all of that. I mean, this movie is, in a really heavy-handed way, making a big deal out of the importance of living in the now, as opposed to being trapped in the past or just being obsessed with the future. And maybe the idea is that whatever the characters in Valley of the Dolls went through was really tragic, but the world sort of still made some kind of sense. And now we're even beyond that. The beyond is like the world is broken now.
Hmm. This movie is the meaning of life. Just straight up.
I'm sure I have overthought this. I'm sure I've taken this too far.
No, that you can never go too far with this movie. That's the magic of it.
Sign flip for this for me is
simultaneously
impossible.
everything.
This is sign proof as much as it's as much as it's like criticism proof if it is. Because I mean, like, I don't know if I'm feeling this or not. I'm glad I saw it. I mean, like, it's still not my thing. I don't know how. I will probably have to watch this again at least one time to be perfectly honest with you. I guess in that sense, and the fact that I will probably be too curious with what I know now not to look at it again. I have to flip green, but it's such a bizarre, impenetrable piece. I don't know how I flip on that.
No, everybody should watch this film. So, like, young and old, just be like, sit your children
Not
down,
too young.
watch this movie. Just tell them it's a sequel to Toy Story or something. It's those kind of dolls.
No.
So yeah, that's all you gotta do. Just watch it with the family. It's perfect.
I was watching this like an hour ahead of Austin, and when I got into the last half hour, I just kept sending Austin messages where I'm like, "It's getting nuts." I'm like, "That's getting really nuts." It's like whatever you think is gonna happen, you can't even. You're just not prepared. I didn't think a guy's head was gonna pop off.
I was definitely not expecting to see a like drag queen, I guess, with like open shirt,
Yeah.
stabbing a Nazi on a beach with a broadsword. But I'm so glad that is an image burned into my brain now.
For a lot of obvious reasons, I can't believe Ebert wrote this, but the biggest one being the end of this is, and I mean, like, I have to say better in just the bombasticness and just how far he took it, but like, it's the end. It's the third act of so many like terrible college scripts that I read in like filmmaking, in like film writing and playwriting classes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it would just suddenly totally go off the rails and be everything in the kitchen sink. It's like everything a screenwriter ever wanted to put in a movie just suddenly gets thrown in there, and like it gets super melodramatic. And because Ebert even talked about this as a soap opera, but like that's so beyond soap opera.
And the Valley of the Dolls.
It's beyond the Valley of the soap opera.
And we also need to note that Gene Siskel gave this a 0,
Yes.
which is very important. It's not surprising, but
He had, and of course, he was already working with Ebert at that time. I think it was like really, really early with them.
oh, okay. I wasn't sure exactly how that lined up.
Yeah, I'm second guessing myself with that a little bit, but I thought they had a local show already in '70.
I
I
can't imagine he'd watch this and be like, "I'm gonna work with this guy."
No, certainly. I mean, they didn't want to work together anyway. I mean, they kind of got sandwiched together. But he has a really amusing quote. I'm trying to find it. Um, oh, where is it? Oh, yeah, here it is. He says it unfolds with all the humor and excitement of a padded bra.
Oh, yes, I did see that.
Boredom aplenty is provided by a screenplay, and this is great because he knows Ebert personally. He says by a screenplay which, for some reason, has been turned over to a screenwriting neophyte.
All I can say is that if you think this movie is boring, I don't know what's up with you.
I didn't have that, certainly. It certainly made me dreadfully uncomfortable in a number of places.
That sounds about right, but it's not boring.
The biggest one being when Blossom sleeps with the guy who's trying to get her to just take like 50 grand and walk away.
Mhm.
That whole thing. That was very
yeah.
uncomfortable.
Yeah, that like older guy.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, when that scene is like directly parodied in Austin Powers, I thought that was very strange. And one of the actors in this movie is in the first two Austin Powers.
Oh, really?
So like they were definitely looking at that. That's not me reading into it.
See, and then that makes me wonder, you know, how much of this is just you and I are, and I mean, you especially too young to have any historical perspective with this, where, or to have enough where it's like, wait, have we watched things in especially like the 80s and 90s that expected us to have seen this movie? I think we have!
Like Toy Story, like I said earlier.
But like Austin Powers.
Yeah, no, when I was looking at IMDb to figure out if I was reading in the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood connection,
Yeah.
there's like a ton of things that they listed on there that reference this movie or pay homage to it.
I got an absolute education watching this movie.
I got something out of it, and that's a new view on life.
Yeah, I feel like I feel like we're both changed people after this. This is one of those experiences where, and I don't mean this humorously. Like I really mean this when I say this. This is one of those experiences where when you finish it, you're like, there's the me from before this, and the me after this. Like,
no, it's one of those things where you
better
always
or worse,
where you were.
It has an effect on you where you remember where you were.
Yeah, exactly.
You're saying this itself was like a personal 9/11.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. But like a parody of 9/11.
My brain is fried just trying to make sense out of this. Thematic sense out of this.
Yeah, I mean, what else can you say about it? It's Beyond the Valley of the Dolls. It speaks for itself. Just everybody go out and watch this movie.
If you're super curious about it and you've not seen it, it is on Amazon Rental right now for $4. That's how I watched it.
Actually, yeah. Now that you say that, that reminds me. Everybody.
I don't know if anybody's streaming it.
Everybody write to Disney, because when Disney bought Fox, they put this in the vault, and who knows if it'll ever come back. But screw you, Disney. Give us back Beyond the Valley of the Dolls.
Yeah, I mean, like, maybe they'll do some kind of physical release for it again, because the singular release is out of print and has been for a long time. I think there's like a collection of movies that this is in, that you can get it in. I think I read that.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. But I just remember reading at the end of the Wikipedia, it was like, oh,
Yeah,
Disney
I
locked
saw
this
that
up.
too.
Boo.
Which read a lot like they don't plan on ever letting you see that
Yeah.
again.
Yeah, no, this is not like this will be a Song of the South. This will get buried, and they'll like make sure nobody sees it again. But
They're
they
not
should
saving it for
be-
like 10th anniversary of Ebert's passing or anything like that. Like,
No, put this on 4K and release the Disney Plus reboot.
I want the Criterion release of this. I don't know what you're talking about.
That'd be awesome too.
What else haven't we covered with this that you want to make sure that we talk about?
I don't think there's really anything. 'Cause for me, this is more of just an experience than anything. It just kind of washes over you. Like I don't remember any of the characters' names. Like I know who they are in the movie because they all have a very distinct look. But it's it's one of those kinds of movies.
Do you remember the scene where Mike Tyson tries to run a guy down with a car? It's not Mike Tyson, but I think it's actually supposed to be based on Mike Tyson.
Is it? Was Mike Tyson? I was going to show how young I am, but was he like doing his thing by 1970?
I think so. No, not Mike Tyson. I'm sorry.
Muhammad Ali.
Muhammad Ali. Yeah, I said the wrong guy.
That's why I was thinking. I'm like,
Yeah, sorry, I said the wrong boxer. No, of course not.
he's fighting Superman.
Yeah. I had a chance to get my hands on that comic once, and it was just a little too stiff. But man, I wanted that.
Oh, I've had that for years. My dad got it for me for my birthday.
Oh,
once.
really? That's cool. Is it in good shape? Do you have a good one?
Yeah. Yep.
Man,
Yeah, no, you got it like pristine.
That's
It's,
pretty cool. I like to have that.
It's a pretty interesting read.
Yeah, I've never read it.
It's definitely something.
Well, anyway, thanks again to Stone Gassman for making us watch This Insanity. And if you've watched this movie, leave a comment, tell us what you thought about it. And we will see you again real soon. As Austin suggested earlier, we're going to be tackling something very, very different next time. We're reading some really early, I guess the first run of Kamen Rider comics of all things. So some manga, which we've never tackled on this show before. And look forward to that.
Yeah, you're gonna have to watch that video like back to forward in reverse.
Wait, what? Why?
Because it's manga. You read
Oh!
it right to left.
I should have been right there with you, but I thought you meant this video, and I was very confused.
Oh, no, it was a very cerebral joke. Bye, everyone.
We'll see you later, folks.